All right, this video is going to talk about how to set up a document in Adobe Illustrator, which is the software program that I will be using in this class um, for the demos and all of the exercises and the projects. The reason I use Illustrator is because, for one, on campus, we've got the Adobe Creative Cloud, and the Creative Cloud is, Adobe's subscription-based service for software. And so if you're in class and if you're in class on the on-ground class, you will be using Adobe Illustrator because that's what we have. That's what we have. If you are online, excuse me, the demos are all in Illustrator, but you can certainly use other software. There are options aside from Adobe that you can download from the internet. Some of them are free, some of them cost a little bit of money. There is a list of possible software options in the textbook in the introduction section. So there's things like Affinity Designer or Inkscape. There's a few others, Sketch, and so on. So those are options for you. However, you are on your own when it comes to learning the software. I don't have demos for any of those other options. Okay, so this is Adobe Illustrator, and it's a powerful program. It's been around since about 1987. I've been using it since version 1. It's in some ways hasn't changed at all, and in some ways it's added a lot of features. The good news about Illustrator, even though it's really powerful, it's not a very fast program. It's not like a Ferrari. Certain programs like Maya, the 3D program, or Adobe After Effects, even Adobe Premiere Pro, these are all software programs that are what I would call fast programs. You can get into trouble really fast with them and wrap yourself around a telephone pole before you know it and have no idea how to get out of it. Illustrator, fortunately, is more like a truck. It's difficult to get fast with it, and it's almost always possible to undo damage in case you go down the wrong road. In this software, I'm going to essentially be skipping the stone over the software. We are not going to get into the depths of the power of this program. This is not a class in Adobe Illustrator. This is a class in graphic design. So I'm only going to be teaching you the software functions that we need for each project along the way. It's cumulative, so every time you learn something in one project, you add it to the next one. But it's essentially, we're only using some of the most basic functionality that's been part of Illustrator since 1987. So no fancy, 3D mesh grids, no painting tools. Well, we might get into a little bit of that later on, but for now, we're just going to deal with the essentials of the program. All right. When you launch Adobe Illustrator, it may open up a whole bunch of windows, probably will, most of which you're going, holy cow, what does this work? My suggestion is close everything except for your main window. All right, and then we're going to set up a new document, which is easy to do right from the get-go. Click New. All right, so it's going to ask me a few things. And they're going to give you a whole bunch of options for, presets and so on. We don't need to worry about that. All we're going to be doing is we're going to be starting out with a 600 by 600 sized graphic, or if you're on a smaller monitor, you can use 400s. You can use points or you can use pixels. Either one, it doesn't matter. I'm going to use pixels because we are primarily dealing in a pixel environment. Orientation doesn't matter because it's square. Okay, we're going to make only one artboard, leave all your other options the same. RGB is the default for color, leave it in RGB. Okay, so that's all we need to do. We just hit create and we end up with a window. All right, so Command 1 will center the document in your window. Now I've sort of scaled mine down a little bit so that it fits in the video. Yours may end up being really huge. This window is scalable, so you can do pretty much whatever you want. All right. I'm just going to leave this open. Like I said, a bunch of windows are going to open up all over the place. Close everything. Leave only your tools open for starters, okay? So I'm going to open up a few windows just so that we have something to work with. And organizing your workspace is important in Illustrator. So we'll talk about a little bit more about that in 2 seconds. Okay, so in the window menu, we're going to open up a few things. We're going to open up the Align tool, because we're going to need that. We're going to open up the, what is it what I need next here? Going down the list here, we're going to need layers. So we'll open that up and that pops up over here. We are going to need the Pathfinder tool. So we'll open that up. And we are going to need the Stroke tool. Okay, so these are the tools. Now notice that I've popped mine up and they're all in a kind of an organized order. Your windows won't open up the same way, but my suggestion straight away is to come up with a structure in your layout that you like that works inside of your monitor. I've optimized this for video, okay? And again, so a lot of these things may end up being docked at some point, and you can undock them by simply grabbing the window. Like say, for example, these two are docked. If you want to take something and make it a new window, you can simply click on it and drag it, and it will become its own window. I'm going to leave mine up here because these are two windows that make sense. So Align, Transform, Stroke, and Pathfinder. If I didn't say open the Transform window, do that now, and that's over in here in Transform right there, okay? So those are the 4 windows that you're going to need to get started with. Layers are kind of cool to have open because you can kind of see what's happening as you start to build these things, and we'll talk a little bit more about layers here as we start to build and add stuff to it. This is our toolbox, our toolbar, okay? There's a lot of tools here, most of which we won't use. The tool that we'll start with here is the selection tool, okay? So that's the first one. This here looks like a selection tool, but it's not. It sub-selects elements. We may need to get into that a little bit, but for now, let's just leave that alone. So this is a tool we're going to use. We're going to use the pen tool, okay? Sometimes called the path tool, depending on your software. We'll call it the pen tool. We will be using the line tool, the line segment tool, okay? So we're going to be using that. We're going to be using the shape tool. In this case here, notice that there's little corners here, and each one of these corners indicates that there are, if you click on the little corner, you'll see that there's a whole bunch of options here. So for starters, we're going to deal with the ellipse tool, okay? I think the default is the rectangle, but we'll just use the ellipse tool for starters, okay? And those are the only tools we're going to need straight away. The other elements that we need to talk about are the fill and the stroke, okay? And so these two elements are, these two attributes of the objects that we're going to be creating will be important, okay? So notice as soon as I clicked on that, my color palette opened up. We're not going to need the color palette straight away, so I'm going to just sort of scoot that over to the side and just let it hang out there where you can't see it on my other monitor. Okay, so what else do we want to talk about here? Oh yeah, right here. You're going to want to work at 100%. Okay, depending on your screen, it might be defaulting to one of these smaller sizes, but it's important to work at 100% because what happens is, no, we don't want to do that. We'll cancel that. We want to do that because if you're at odd sizes, the pixels get a little strange, and sometimes like a line might just disappear between the 2 pixels, and you'll, hey, what happened to my line? So if you're at 100%, you're in good shape there, okay? So the other thing I do is I have my project window open, okay? So my project window is over here, and I'm going to sort of just scooch this down. And this is kind of my laundry list, so I'm going to shoot this over to the side over here. And what I'm going to do then is, let's see, make sure this is all copacetic. It is. Okay, so this is my laundry list. This is what I need to do for this project, okay? So I keep this open so that I can kind of, make sure I'm doing the right thing when I'm making my project, right? So that's all set up. I'm gonna hide layers for now just so I can leave this window open, and that way in the video you'll see the whole thing. Okay, so that's how I'm setting up my workspace. If you want to save a workspace, you can go into Window and you can say Workspace, and then you can say New Workspace. And so here, if you like what you've just done, let me scoot this over here, you can call this, you know, my workspace or whatever you want to call it, right? And I'm going to call this Video Workspace because I normally wouldn't set it up this way for my own working situation, but for me, this is what I want to use when I'm doing videos for you guys, okay? So that's what I'm doing, all right? Video Workspace. You can set yours up any which way you want, okay? And then if you like it, just name it, and then you're good. All right, let's get to the project. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is we're going to be doing a grid. So we set grids by going into the preferences. So and I'm on a Mac, on a PC, slightly different, but mostly the same. Okay, so in preferences, I'm going to slide over and you'll see guides and grids. Okay, so this helps me to set my grids up. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is, again, I'm now in guides and grids. Here's all the other options. We're not going to worry about any of this stuff right now. It's unimportant. I don't care about guides right now. I do care about the grid. Okay, so I pick a custom color for my grid, and what I kind of like a sort of a light, kind of a teal color. It for some reason that color for a grid it's unobtrusive, but you can still see it. I do not recommend using black for your grid or anything dark because it really intrudes on your design and it does affect what you see. So we'll be turning the grid off and on to actually see what we're doing, because every element, whether it's something that's a permanent element or a grid, is going to impact our design. Okay, so I just picked my color for my grid. I think that's a good color. Say, I got to close that up. Okay, and then now here, I'm set up at 600 by 600, right? So now if I want 10 grid squares per side, or 100 grid squares for my entire composition, you divide 600 by 10 and you get 60, right? You can certainly set this up to be other sizes, but the idea is that it should be a multiple of 6. So you can do 60 per side, you can do 30 per side, 15 per side, and each one of those are going to be a little bit different, but I want to have 10 per side, and subdivisions will be 1, okay? And the reason why is because you can have little hash marks in between your main grids, and that gets a little bit, it's more than we need. So we're going to have 1 subdivision per side, and we want to put the grids in the back, okay? Because that way our stuff is in the front, all right? Okay, that takes care of our grid. And so we can't see our grid yet, right? So we have to go into View, and we say Show Grid. And we also want to snap to grid. Okay, so I'm going to show grid first so we can see I got 10 by 10. All right. And then I'm going to go back to View, and I'm going to put Snap to Grid on. What Snap to Grid's about is that it allows, when you make a shape, it actually will snap to the corners, and you don't have to make it precise. Okay, so that's important. All right, so our document's now set up. Now we're going to use a Show and Hide Grid, and I might as well talk about that now. So in the View, you'll see Hide Grid, right? Now, rather than going into View, going to the menu and blah, 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 right, we can just use this really quick keyboard command, which is the splat, and it's the, what do they call that? It's not an apostrophe. And so this is on the Mac, it's Command. This would be Control on a PC. And so Command and apostrophe hides and shows the grid. So this is real quick, right? Command apostrophe, grid goes away. Command apostrophe, grid shows up. Okay, so that way we can turn it on and off real fast while we're working. All right, that's essentially the functionality of setting up a document for this project. Okay, so in the next video, we'll talk about how to make the project work. All right.